Now, we are our own biggest roadblock. We let our fears immobilize us and tell ourselves stories that justify our reluctance to take action. And we convince ourselves that we're not good enough and that our efforts will probably end in failure. But those stories are pure fiction and have no real basis in reality.
I know people are inherently lazy, but what you can do with quote, what you call a lazy person is go sit down with them and try to find out what their passion is. The other thing you do is get them to be physical. A lot of times what the laziness is the more we sit today, people don't move. But if you physically go do a sport or something with someone like that, you'll see another side of them. And when you see that other side and they see you recognizing that side, it'll create a different bond with you. But labeling them lazy is the worst thing you can do because now it's a character defect as opposed to you understanding what really makes this person work. I always tell people aren't lazy, they just have infinite goals. You know, your goals affect you whatever they are. So because I have no goals. Well, yes, you do. You have a goal to get through the day. You have a goal to make it through this next hour. You have a goal to get to your coffee. You know, if those are your goals, you're not gonna find much of your spirit and soul awakened. I think motive does matter. And you gotta find something that is a motive that is their motive. In other words, something that fulfills them, or you got to move them to a place where they can do something where they are fulfilled. You really got to be a practical psychologist. You really got to be able to understand what do people fear, what do they desire, what do they need, what are they worried about, and then show them how to meet their needs through the company's goals as well, at least some of their needs. And then you're going to unleash the power of your organization.
I'd like you to stop telling yourself that you're a born procrastinator or you're naturally a lazy person. It's not true. You were not born that way. It's just a story you tell yourself, which means it's a story you can change. So from now on, every time you chide yourself for procrastinating or being lazy, I want you to tell yourself that you already have everything you need to accomplish any goal you can imagine, because that is the real truth of the matter. I'd like you to consider this question. Is it really your tendency to procrastinate that's stopping you from taking action? Or are you simply overwhelmed? You know, all too often, the reason why you don't take action is because you're not sure what action you should take. Your goals seem so big and there's so much to learn and do that it seems like an unimaginable task. So it's not a character flaw that's holding you back, it's a lack of clarity and planning. Now, the other reason is you have so many things to do and no criteria for deciding which one to do first. So refer back to your passions, your purpose, and your top values to help you decide which ones to do first. And once you do decide, clarify your goals, chunk them down into small but achievable action steps, and then systematically completing those small steps one after another. Now, a lot of us will procrastinate when we're forced to work toward outcomes we just don't really care about. It's a lot easier to stay motivated when you're spending your time and your energy on something that's aligned with your purpose and your passions and that's deeply important to you. So when it comes to taking action, make sure to focus your time and your energy on the things that matter most, and then delegate everything else as much as you can.
The mistake I made wasn't to say that something is possible when it was not. It was to say that something was impossible before I knew that, because I think that science is all about going to those dark places and trying to find what's impossible. My mistake was to say it was impossible before I was sure about that. So I should have said, we don't know yet, we didn't do it yet, but we should investigate. I was quick to say, I didn't do it, it's impossible. So I delayed things by 3 years. 5 years after, I'm doing it right now.
So you have an entire generation that's growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations. The other problem, to compound it, is we're growing up in a Facebook, Instagram world. In other words, we're good at putting filters on things. We're good at showing people that life is amazing even though I'm depressed, right? And so everybody sounds tough, and everybody sounds like they got it all figured out. And the reality is there's very little toughness, and most people don't have it figured out. You have an entire generation growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations, right? Through no fault of their own. Through no fault of their own, right? They were dealt a bad hand, right? Now let's add in technology. We know that engagement with social media and our cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, it feels good. Because we know when you get it, you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it, it's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right?
Well, dreams is something that I was told not to study. Now that's what I do in my lab every day. Now I'm never saying something is impossible before I'm certain that it's impossible.
Wow, I love that. I'd love it even more if you would go so far as to say nothing is truly impossible. then you'd really have
So
me.
I'll go with that. So you mentioned that I teach screenwriting and I work with TV. The reason I do that is because I feel that the best ideas for my research come from those hours with the kids who write plays, with the fellows at the American Film Institute who write science fiction, from movies that inspired me, like The Matrix. You mentioned that, like this has inspired us. We're kids of 1999. What happened then affected us. Star Trek affected my dad's generation. The best paper that I ever written has 1,000 of citation. The episode of Limitless that I worked on last week and came out has 5 million people watching it, and those are the kids who are going to be me in 20 years, and if they think, oh, this is maybe possible, they're going to do that. You ask me how to change behavior, this is how. To know what the possibilities are.
And so I keep meeting these wonderful, fantastic, idealistic, hardworking, smart kids. They've just graduated school. They're in their entry-level job. And I sit down with them and I go, how's it going? They go, I think I'm going to quit. I'm like, why? They're like, I'm not making an impact. I'm like, you've been here 8 months. It's as if they're standing at the foot of a mountain and they have this abstract concept called impact that they want to have in the world, which is the summit. What they don't see is the mountain. I don't care if you go up the mountain quickly or slowly, but there's still a mountain. And so what this young generation needs to learn is patience. That some things that really, really matter, like love, or job fulfillment, joy, love of life, self-confidence, a skill set, any of these things, all of these things take time. The best case scenario is you'll have an entire population growing up and going through life and just never really finding joy. They'll never really find deep fulfillment in work or in life. They'll just waft through life and it'll be just, it's fine. How's your job? It's fine, same as yesterday. How's your relationship? It's fine. Like that's the best case scenario. We have to work extra hard to figure out the ways that we build their confidence. We have to work extra hard to find ways to teach them the social skills that they're missing out on. There should be no cell phones in conference rooms. None, zero.
Your brain goes with you and it carries all of the history in the form of memories. All you have from what happened before you is stored in the form of memories, and they're not accurate and they're kind of compressed. So that's all you have about the past. You have no idea in the future, even though your brain tries to predict it all the time. This is what dreams are for, this is what decisions are for. You try to kind of simulate the future and make predictions. You don't know what's going on. All you have is this kind of sliver of reality, which is the present, which is all you have. And you control everything that happens there. The nice thing about the present is that actually it interacts with everything in your brain and you can change things. What we learned in the last 5 years is that memories are different in how they work. And what, if I had to summarize it in one sentence, they change every time you use them. So if you have a memory stored here of what you had for lunch yesterday, and I ask you, what did you have for lunch? You basically open the memory right now and you tell me a story, but whatever happens right now goes into the story and you save it differently. And if I ask you tomorrow what you had for lunch, you'll open the modified version. So every time I ask you the same question, you open a different version, which means you can actually change the past. You can actually change your experience of things. This is why therapy works, right? You go, your girlfriend breaks up with you, you go to the therapist, she asks you what happened, you tell the story, she intervenes, you save it differently. You ask you a week after, what happened, you tell a different story. After 5 meetings, you have a different version of the reality. And that is powerful because it means that we control the narrative that we have. We don't really have to be kind of confined to the story that we experience. We can actually change it. This is what the brain is for, to simulate and change and adjust and synthesize better version of life. We can make ourselves happy, we can make bad things look better, we can control things, and it's all by virtue of just telling a story, looking at it differently, and saving it again. It's as simple as that. We have the ability to actually change the story all the time. So learning is one way to do that. Thinking and reflecting about ourselves is another way to do that. Having more experiences allows us to do that. We know all of this now. So suddenly there's kind of essence to this self-help book that we read when we were kids, and we know how to implement that.
Trust doesn't form at an event in a day. Even bad times don't form trust immediately. It's the slow, steady consistency. And we have to create mechanisms where we allow for those little innocuous interactions to happen. But when we allow cell phones in conference rooms, we just, okay, had the meeting. We now have a responsibility to make up the shortfall and to help this amazing, idealistic, fantastic generation build their confidence. learn patience, learn the social skills, find a better balance between life and technology. Because, quite frankly, it's the right thing to do.